And your rod, your reel, and your bait are something that's obviously really, really important when you're fishing, but there's only one thing that's truly connecting you to that fish, and that's your fishing line. And line is something that I think is so important, and really serious battle-hardened touring pros, they have dialed it into a science on certain types of line to get the most maximum importance and their effect to the bait that they're throwing from the presentation that they're using while they're on the water. And I think that's something that the average guy can add to his into his war chest, into his thinking, into his planning, into his day of fishing, and really be impressed with the results of it. Another good one out of the hardwoods. He has that swim bait all the way down in there. You know, you really can break fishing line down to 3 categories, I feel, and within those categories there are subcategories most certainly, but monofilament, fluorocarbon, and braided line are the 3 categories that I talk about the most. And when I get asked questions via social media, at a trade show, or at a boat ramp, wherever it may be, what's the best fishing line? I simply tell them, I said, there's not just one. It's all based on a variety of situations. You know, are you fishing on the bottom? Are you fishing vertically? Are you cranking and winding? You fishing top water? There's so many variables there that really have to come into play to be able to answer that there is no one pat answer, because by mixing it up and matching your line to the right situation, you're going to get the most benefit out of it. Come here, buddy. Come here. Gotcha. Your monofilament stretches and it floats. Fluorocarbon sinks and stretches a little bit. Braid floats and doesn't stretch at all. So each one of those, by that definition and that breakdown, are going to have different applications out there that are going to help you be successful when you can match them up. So you as the fisherman need to spend some time learning how each one of those lines work for the different presentations that you're going to be doing. And when you do, you're going to find success. From there, tying the knots is going to be very key, because there's times you blend them together, and then there's times when they operate separately, and there's times when you want one knot and don't want another.
Coming up after the break, we take a look at each individual line type: fluorocarbon, monofilament, and braid. We start by breaking down the characteristics of each. Some sink, others float. One works great for topwaters, while the other is better suited for fishing with crankbaits. And after introducing each line, we'll then take a look at knots that pair well with that particular line and presentation. Stay tuned.
We know if you found one crappie, you may have found 1,000. We know the joy of getting your boots back in the mud. We know the journey can be more rewarding than the destination. We know the great outdoors. We love the great outdoors. Bass Pro Shops and Cabela's. Stop by today for huge savings on the gear you need and the brands you trust. Plus free 2-day shipping at basspro.com and cabela's.com.
Groundbreaking designs, unsurpassed quality, and unshakable confidence. Welcome to the Ranger Z500 and Z100 series. Leading the industry for over 50 years, these rigs are custom crafted and loaded with more features and advantages to deliver the ultimate ownership experience. The legendary Ranger Z series. Unleash next level performance. Mercury, go boldly.
The Fisherman's Handbook is brought to you in part by Bass Pro Shops and Cabela's. Your adventure starts here. Garmin, fight your fish, not your fish finder. Ranger Boats, still building legends one at a time.
Monofilament is, that's probably what the majority of us guys that are a little bit older started fishing with, some variation of monofilament. You know, for me, I actually still use monofilament in several presentations. Monofilament floats. It's a line that stays up higher in the water column, which makes it phenomenal for fishing topwaters. Now, there are times when I will tie monofilament directly to braid when I'm fishing topwaters, like a big walking the dog type bait, or, you know, a popper in certain situations. But a lot of times I'll just go straight mono in those types of situations. I also still throw a crankbait at times with monofilament. When it's really cold and really windy outside, I think monofilament is the most manageable line that you possibly can find on the market today. I prefer Sunline Super Mono in like a 10 to 12 pound test for a lot of my cranking, especially when it's cold out there. And I also like to use monofilament on those high bluebird days when fishing is a little tough because it's got stretch. Why would I want to have stretch? Well, I feel like when fish are slapping at a bait, maybe not as aggressively eating it, I want something that's a little more forgiving, because when I feel a bite, I might jerk that bait away from him too fast. So there are times when I still will chunk and wine with monofilament in a lot of different fishing situations.
Monofilament. When, where, how, why, when would I fish it? Gerald, there's a lot of lines out there. When do I choose monofilament? Anytime your bait's floating. How about that? If you're gonna throw top water and you don't want to throw it on a light braid, throw it on monofilament. For instance, I just left the Sabine a few months ago. I was throwing a small popper on 14-pound Supernatural. The line floats super right, but the castability of it will blow your mind. Supernatural monofilament to me is anything you want to throw on the surface, go with monofilament. Anything that's going under the water, you can go with fluoro.
Can you use fluorocarbon for topwater fishing? Sure. But think about this, fluorocarbon sinks. And so when your line sinks, you know, here's your little topwater bait sitting out here floating on the water. When your line sinks and goes underwater, you got to pop that line up out of the top of the water for it to be able to get action, whereas monofilament is floating there. And so as you're working that bait, walking the dog, whatever, you don't have to get that line out of the water like that. And the other thing is, 9 times out of 10, when you get a topwater bite, you're going to jerk too fast. I mean, that's just how we're all wired. Well, fluorocarbon has less stretch. Monofilament, it's got more stretch. Maybe that extra stretch will cause you to hook up to that fish and allow him to get hooked up. Got him. Got him. Ooh! Another Rayburn 2.5 pounder. It's just full of fish of this size. Just plumb full of them. Come here, buddy. Oh, yeah. Little spot on his tail, that's pretty cool. Another little topwater fish. That's fun. Let you go back, buddy.
Fluorocarbon and braid have gotten all the spotlight the past few years, but there's still a place for nylon in an angler's arsenal. Sunline has 2 premium nylons in the Defier family that can help an angler catch more fish. Both lines were designed by Japanese expert angler Morizo Shimizu. Armillo was designed for use with topwaters, big crankbaits, and swim baits. It features low overall stretch and particularly low initial stretch ratio to improve hook sets and sensitivity on long casts. It comes in a stealth gray color and is available in sizes from 11 to 25 pound tests. The sister line to Armillo is Defier, which was designed specifically for use with hard baits. Line friction while casting has been minimized to allow for long casts. Defier comes in a stealth dark green color in sizes from 11 to 22 pound test.
He ate it. Thought that was like a 4 pounder. Oh, thank you, sir.
Stetson Blaylock, Todd Auden, Hank Terry, let's go!
Garmin Live Scope, I tell you right now, if you don't have it, you are behind. It's just wild. It's like a video game.
If you do not have that Garmin Live Scope, you are definitely missing out.
Bassmaster Classic Champion!
Your time on the water is precious. You return season after season to make unforgettable memories. Fight a few fish, reconnect with friends, and recenter yourself. If you count on having this time, you need an outboard you can count on to power it. That's why boaters stay with Yamaha for the long run, for life. They know reliability starts here.
From sun up to sundown, day in and day out, we work hard. We play hard. And to keep us going during those long hours, we demand performance. Angle Coolers, the original high-performance cooler.
The Fisherman's Handbook is brought to you in part by Yamaha Marine. Reliability starts here. Angle, the original high-performance cooler. Sunline America, the strength to guarantee your confidence. And by Big Bite Baits, designed to bring the big bite to your line.
Fluorocarbon, man, if money was no object, I think everybody would probably use fluorocarbon more than anything. Fluorocarbon tends to be a little more expensive, but it is the most sensitive line you possibly can use. I love like Sunline Sniper, Sunline Shooter, lines like that, as well as several others that are really technique specific that Sunline has designed. They give you incredible feel and sensitivity. They sink, they get right down there into the action with you. There's very little to no stretch to fluorocarbon. So what you feel is amazing while it's out on the water. And I tell people all the time, take some monofilament, take some fluorocarbon and throw it out and drag a bait through the same rocks and tell me what you feel. You're gonna feel something totally different, which allows you to maintain contact and feel those little subtle bites, to feel those little ticks, to know when to shake that bait. And so fluorocarbon is my line of choice. Worms, big baits on the bottom, things along those lines. I do crank with it. I do throw all my weightless stuff. I'm generally throwing fluorocarbon on a braided leader, which we'll touch on a little bit later. But fluorocarbon is probably the most popular line, top to bottom, for most bass fishing applications that you're going to find. You know, when I start looking at fluorocarbon, what I'm looking at is I want, the best, smoothest line available, because not all lines are created the same. FC Sniper by Sunline is probably the best go-to all-around fluorocarbon line I've ever seen. It performs under any light situation. Basically, it's going to not be visible in any light situation, which is what you want. The sensitivity of it when you're dragging a bait around on the bottom is phenomenal. It'll allow you to detect those strikes out there. And when you get that strike, the durability and the toughness, knowing that when you crack back on one, you set the hook and you hammer one, whether it's flipping into a bush or it's trying to set the hook, 30 yards from the boat, it's going to perform for you. So when you start looking at that, that's really important to a fisherman out there, because your money's hard earned. You want to make sure you're using something that's going to perform. Now think about this though, in the very same situation. I crank with FC Sniper a lot. The Sunline also has a crankbait line that is specifically designed to perform for you when you're crankbait fishing. And they've also got other lines in their lineup that have been developed by their incredible pro staff and guys far smarter than me that understand a lot more about fishing lines to help you get the most in all your different situations. So when you're trying to digest picking out lines, you want to spend some time really studying all the different opportunities that are available.
I love throwing crankbaits. Crankbaits are something that I'm extremely passionate about. I've designed a bunch of baits for Spro, and I tell you, I've not found the exact right, perfect fluorocarbon to throw it on until now. This is the Sunline Crank FC.
This Sunline FC crank is going to be the line that I would have to say of any of the Sunline products I use the most of. I mean, when it comes to throwing crankbaits, jerk baits, vibrating jigs, spinner baits, I mean, just all of those reaction baits, anything that I'm going to chunk out there and wind in, FC crank is the line that I like to use.
Now, what makes this line different is it is a great fluorocarbon, but it's also got the P-ion coating over top of it. What that PIon coating does is it's not just a material that's added to it, it's actually built into the molecules on the outside of that line. Water does not stick to it. Plus, it's got a little bit extra stretch into the line, so it allows your bait to get eaten a little bit better, but you still have the sensitivity of fluorocarbon. So extremely sensitive, you get a little extra stretch from normal fluorocarbon. That's what makes it the perfect shallow crankbait line.
Come here, buddy. Man. I often get questions a lot on, knots and different knots for different situations, and the Palomar is probably my go-to knot for the majority of my rigging out there, and it's a very easy knot to tie. You can find out a ton of different information on all these knots on the Sunline website. They've got a ton of data where they've analyzed the best knots for the different types of lines, whether it's fluorocarbon, whether it's braided lines, whether it's tying them together, whether it's whatever different applications that's out there. And it's really important to understand the different knots for the different situations. Tying braided line to monofilament or fluorocarbon is uniquely different, and learning how to tie all those knots is a challenge for some people. So you want a way to be able to digest that information to get the most out of it, and they've got the best library that I've ever seen to help you learn how to tie knots.
As has been expressed many times today, fishing line is an angler's connection to the fish. And one of the most key factors to that particular connection is the knot. We're now going to show you one particular knot that Big Bite Baits and Sunline Pro Michael Neal prefers to use with fluorocarbon.
Hey guys, Michael Neal, Big Bite Baits Pro staff member. I want to show you one of these favorite knots that I tie for anything I'm doing that's really high impact. A lot of guys like a Palomar, a lot of guys hate a Palomar. I use it for pretty much any of my moving baits, but if I'm throwing something that I'm going to really be jerking on, really setting the hook, I'm going to tie this one. It's a little bit different. A lot of people call it double San Diego jam or some sort of version of it, but you start it just like a Palomar, run it through, you got your loop. It's really simple. I take it, hold it up here, wrap it over my finger, just 4 simple wraps around the bait. 3 and 4. All right, and then I'll take it where my fingers were, pull the loop through it, pull these 2 somewhat tight, make sure and wet it, pull your main line and your tag end down, and what you essentially have is a bait that's got 3 tag ends. This right here is something that is extremely tight, extremely good knot, have really, really high break strength. I have a very high success rate with this. It's something I really like.
You know that guy that's always bringing in big ones from offshore? He's got secret lures. That guy that can pull out his spinning rod and start catching them when you can't buy a bite. He's got secret lures. What about that guy that can follow you down the bank and catch what you left behind? He's got secret lures.
Oh, yeah, good one.
If you're ready to be that guy, get your secret lures today at secretlures.com.
You've been waiting all week for this, and Sunline wants to make sure you're ready for it with bulk spools of all your favorite fishing lines.
That's so fun.
Bulk up with Sunline.
The Fisherman's Handbook is brought to you in part by Power Pole Total Boat Control, TH Marine, from transom to trolling motor, and by Spro Sports Professionals.
Oh yeah, come on fish. Why would you want to have a fluorocarbon leader tied to braid? Well, the answer is very simple for a lot of people. Spinning reels are tough to use. The line jumps off of them, and you're going to get knots in it and throwing it into the wind. It's just tough to manage with fluorocarbon. It's basically an impossibility for a long period of time to put fluorocarbon straight on there. But when you put a braided line, and I use a lot of 10, 12, 20 pound test whenever I'm using my braided line on there so that I can cast it long distances, back my drag off a little bit, and then I'll use a similar size, and a lot of times leader or smaller, for my leader material. And that's how I fish a lot of my wacky worm type style baits. That's how I drop shots. That's how I crappie fish a lot. And the reason being is that fluorocarbon sinks. And it also, when light goes through the water column, it basically is harder to see. It's more sensitive. And when I tie a good knot, it's gonna last me a long time. But tying that knot, I'm telling you, is one of the hardest things to do out there to make sure it doesn't slip, doesn't break, or whatever. And that's where having a good library of knots that you can learn is so important.
I'm going to show you a very difficult knot, and I learned this off the internet myself. It's called a FG, and it's connecting your braid to a fluoro leader in the best way. So you go over, see that? I take it and go over, and then come back towards you over. So we're doing a braid. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I'm gonna pull these tag line and main line really tight, like so. All right. 10, 11, 12, 13, yeah, 14, 15. I'm gonna do 16, 8 and 8. On the heavier stuff, you really gotta make sure you get that knot really tight, get that braid really tight. The lighter stuff's actually kind of easier, so now we're at 16, 17, 18, 19, 21. I mean, 21 or 22 times is way plenty for heavy line. Again, I'm gonna pull it really tight. This is one of the harder steps because you're holding everything together. Your knot's kind of held together, it's braided. I can let go of it, but I tend to hold it together. So what I have now, I got the main line braid going up, and I have the fluoro that I braided around the braid with the braid. Now you're gonna take this tagging piece that was in your mouth or holding somehow, and you're gonna do 2 double overhands. So I'm gonna go over, see that's 1 overhand, and then I'm gonna go 2. And when the wind's blowing, it's hard to show this knot off. It's easier just to tie it, but I'm gonna pull that overhand down onto the braid and the fluoro, keeping the braid and fluoro, the main line together. Double overhand, just not real tight. I just kind of pull, I do it pretty tight, but I don't do that part real tight. I'm gonna do 1 more double overhand. Keeping that fluoro taut. Slide it down onto your knot. Connection. It's a hard one to show, I'll tell you. So now, once I get that, the 2 double overhands, I cut this fluorocarbon off. You're gonna cut it off really short, as short as you can without touching that braid. If you touch that braid, you can ruin your knot. So you wanna get really close, closer the better, snip it off. You don't want, that's gonna hold. If you do the knot, if you do the connection right, it's not gonna slip. So now what I'm gonna do is do 2 more overhands, doubles. Slide it down, cinch it, 1 more. And that is FG. It takes a little while getting used to. Once you get used to it, it's not too bad. But for tying fluorocarbon to braid, right now I don't know of any connection that's better for fluoro to braided lines. That will last forever.
Fishing line and the knots you use with it are vital pieces of the equation that add up to an angler's success. So, as you prepare for your next fishing adventure, apply the tips from today's show to take your fishing skills to the next level. Thanks for watching this episode of The Fisherman's Handbook. This has been a Caraco TV production.
I got my power pole down, stuck in the mud in the bottom of the lake, sitting so still in the wind. waves, could even be a hurricane. I got my power pole down.
You know, when I look at the tournaments I've won, probably 4 or 5 of the boats that I've won have been on a tube. But I'd completely gotten away from flipping a tube because nobody made one soft enough.
Big Bite has come with this new tour series of baits. The thing that's probably the most unique is when you look at that bait, the salt just rolls out of it. And to me, that is the reason a fish bites a tube and hangs on to it. This isn't one of those let's go out and catch some smallmouth tube. This is a let's get it done tube.
The Little John family expands with new rattling versions of the Little John 50 and Little John 50 MD. Both of these baits are proven fish catchers that will now be available in rattling versions for stained and muddy water. They feature the same great action and diving depths as the original 50 and MD sizes.